Hello YouTube, this is Sam Gerrans from Qur'anite.com, and today is Monday 4th of December 2017. If you don't know my work, I analyze the Qur'an on the basis of the Qur'an's internal textual evidence rather than the tenets of the so-called Islamic religion. I believe the Qur'an is from God, and I reject the Islamic religion or religions as later inventions. You may download my full translation and analysis of the Qur'an, which runs to 536,000 words free from Qur'anite.com. Now, one of my central theses, in a nutshell, is that the Qur'an contains a clear method for overthrowing tyrannies, which I call the God Protocol, and you may read about that in some more detail there. I'm also writing a short book which will explain just this one topic as we speak. Now, what I'm doing in my current phase of work on YouTube is outlining this tyranny, because unless you understand there is a tyranny, then it's quite difficult to argue that there's something that needs to be overthrown. So if you have come to this because of the title and you don't know who I am or what I'm doing or what you're doing here, then hopefully now you do. Just a quick side note, today I'm in the kitchen because for technical reasons, none of which are really very interesting. Today what I want to do is look at the characteristics of cults. I haven't touched on this before, but it's something which bears a little bit more sort of fleshing out. Now, cult is an emotive term with various definitions. To start, I'm going to keep this simple and just concentrate on what we would call destructive cults. For examples of what I'm talking about, we have Jehovah's Witnesses, the Scientologists, Mormons, certain types of Christians, Kabbalah, aficionados, Theosophy, Yoga, Eastern cults, Muslim cults, Islamic cults, etc. But we also have less obvious cults, and these are the cults which run through the waft and web of our culture now. They're absolutely ingrained, embedded in everything that you and I consume in terms of news, and if you watch movies, which we don't really, but you know, that sort of thing, and certainly if you watch television, which it's all in there. This is the moral payload of everything that you consume, including education, which itself is a form of cult. But these would include feminism, which is an absolute cult, the corollary to that, which is the sort of go-girl woman worship, which is a cult. In fact, it's a almost reconstituted ancient Greek cult. Inclusiveness and diversity, that's certainly a cult. These are things you have to believe. Zionism, materialism, government. Government is certainly a cult. How would you explain government to somebody who didn't know what it was? It'd be very difficult. What is it? The buildings? Is it the people? Is it the laws? I mean, what is government if it's not simply an idea agreed upon? Satanism, certainly a cult. And when you know what to look for, you can spot these cults, and Freemasonry also across the world. I mean, why do you think it is that no matter which capital city you go to, and as part of my work for quite a period of time, a lot of my job was travel, and I spent an awful lot of time traveling to capital cities and spending like 3 days there. And I noticed all these capital cities, doesn't matter where you go, if it's Paris, Madrid, London, they've all got, you know, even Singapore. I mean, they've even got, everywhere's got these obelisks, Egyptian icon symbology. When you start to look into that, you realize how this all works. Now, pretty much everyone is in a destructive cult by the above definition. And if we look at this, what are the underlying factors in a cult? The first, and well, they're all three important, but the first and the prerequisite on the part of the target is abdication of independent thought. And this is true for all of these cults. Doesn't matter which one you look at. There has to be, to a greater or lesser degree, an abdication of independent thought. Doesn't matter what you're in, scientism, government, feminism, theosophy, Christianity, Jehovah's Witnesses, Scientology, Islamic cults of various kinds, you know, Sunnism, Shiism. At some point, you have to abdicate independent thought. And it's quite easy to demonstrate, because how likely is it that all the people in these cults would all have arrived at these conclusions independently? And not in a million years. Just as a sidebar, it's always been interesting to me when I'm usually misunderstood and can be accused by various members of my family of so on, of, you know, you're this and you're that. Actually, I'm not, but it's very hard to get them to listen for 2 minutes to find out what it actually is that you're saying. But what is interesting is that people who are especially left-wing, and because I'm not saying because I believe in the left-right paradigm, I don't, but what I have noticed is that people who are more left-wing are generally more susceptible to being collectivistic in mindset. And this is really the dichotomy. It's between collectivists and individualists. And collectivists, they just find an expression in anything, whatever it is, whether it's feminism, Zionism, materialism, scientism, Christianism, Mormonism, theosophy, it doesn't matter, Islam. The cults are for collectivists. And what's interesting to me is when you try to argue with a collectivist, and it's very difficult because you're using actual facts, I mean, in this case, about oneself, but they're not interested in facts. What they're interested in is emotions, because they haven't got facts. They gave up on facts a long time ago. Is that, say, for example, they would be arguing that I am, let's say, you know, I'm a this or I'm a that. What's interesting is the people who are accusing me of whatever it is they think it is that I think, they are typically liberal, indoctrinated beyond belief, and it wouldn't matter what environment you put them in. If you put them in Nazi Germany, they would be Nazis. Why? Because they are drinking the Kool-Aid in this system, they would be drinking the Kool-Aid in that system. Whereas I'd be against it. I can think in this system, I would be thinking in that system. Put them in Ayatollah Khomeini's Iran, they would be, you know, they would be dyed-in-the-wool Shias, absolutely. Why? Because they are collectivistic by nature. So the first part of any cult is that it requires the abdication of independent thought, and most people are quite happy to go along with that. But there are another two aspects that I've noticed to all of these cults, and the second is deception, and I'll get into that as I go forward. And the third, crucially, is lack of personal responsibility, and I'll get into that. So first of all, abdication of independent thought. I've already touched on this above, but what happens is that for the individual to remain a part of the group, there needs to take place, or they feel there's a pressure for the person to perform some sort of brain operation, where you almost take out a part of your brain in order to remain a part of the group. We are social creatures, and we have a social bias, and we have a desire to be a part of the group to survive. And this is manipulated by cults because they know this about us. So again, you know, when it's this abdication of independent thought, the individual goes along with conclusions, as I said above, that he would never have come to in a million years in order to maintain a position within the group. For me, as regards to the Qur'an, in fact, it's before the Qur'an, before I ever came to the Qur'an. In my own experiences in life, I made a very firm decision that I was going to follow truth for me, no matter where it led. And if it be truth, then it's truth. And if it's not, well, okay, we'll deal with that. I'm talking to you from my own experience. I was a young man at 19. I got wrapped up in the sort of Christian group. It was, you know, some Bible, some this, some that, but mainly nonsense. And I wasn't in it for very long. And I came out the other side, and I just felt, I felt like I had cheapened myself, frankly. And I just made a very firm decision. I mean, you've got to understand that the human desire to serve God is extremely deep in certain people, and it's certainly deep in me. But after that experience, I decided never again. And it wasn't never again to do with God. It was never again, because I had my misgivings at the time. And I was 19, you know. But I came out the other side and thought, nah, not going to do that again. If it's not true, it's not true. I'd rather know that I don't believe anything if I know that I know why. So I'd done my due diligence with the Qur'an. I was ruthless with it, and I remain ruthless with it. And the Qur'an itself says, if there be better than this Qur'an, I would follow it, and that's my position. I don't have any dogmatic, sort of attachment to any group or any ism. I use my brain. It's not a popular pursuit, as anybody who has done it will know. As the hate mail bears witness. Anyway, going on with the cults thing. All cults, all destructive cults, have a hidden agenda. They don't tell you what you're signing up for. Okay? That's something they've all got in common. You didn't know when you were born, when you were given a tax slave number in your system on the tax farm that you live in, and it doesn't matter which country you live in, you're on a tax farm. They're basically, it's feudalism, it's economic feudalism. They're sucking out, depending on where you live, up to 80% of your income in obvious, hidden, subtle taxes. And then they take the rest when you die. Did they tell you that when you were born? Did they tell you that at school? No, of course not. You're inculcated into this as something being normal. Likewise, the Jehovah's Witnesses, they don't tell you that when you first go to the Kingdom Hall, and I was never a Jehovah's Witness, I just happened to find Jehovah's Witnesses interesting. They don't tell you that, if you get baptized, after you get baptized, and then you find out something about them, like, for example, the Australian Commission and all of the horrendous activities practiced by Jehovah's Witnesses. I'm talking here about child molestation, and covered up by them because they've got the 2-witness rule. So unless you've got 2 witnesses to molestation, then they won't investigate internally, and they'll cover it up. Now, if you didn't know that when you joined up, when you became a Jehovah's Witness, and then you find it out, once you've been baptized, you can't back out. Well, you can, but you lose your family, your parents, your brothers and sisters, anyone you know who is a practicing Jehovah's Witness. They won't speak to you for the rest of their lives. Ever. It's called shunning. Now, all cults, from the Mafia to the Mormons, have similar methodologies. And no cult will tell you up front what it's about. They act deceptively and they manipulate. Now, anyone who's old enough to understand the language that I'm using knows that, or will be able to relate some part of their experience to this. The Freemasons don't tell you who and what they are before you join. None of them do. I mean, look, we'll get into it as feminism. Let's get into this as we go forward. Hold on. Responsibility, because this is really associated. Let's take feminism, which is a cult. So some foolish, poor, intellectually not brilliant woman has drunk the Kool-Aid about how amazing she is and she doesn't need a man, etc. And now she's 43 and living in a house full of cats. Will Gloria Steinem, this is one of the big promoters of this nonsense, well, it's not even nonsense, it's worse than nonsense, this vileness. Is she going to come to her house personally and apologize for ruining her life and make it all better? No, of course she isn't. So this is what cults do. They trick you, they dump you, and then they just leave you. There's no responsibility. They take no responsibility. If you go through the list again, it's exactly the same. Doesn't matter where you are. They'll use you up and then they'll just dump you. Jehovah's Witnesses, Scientologists, Mormons, a lot of Christians. I'm not talking about all Christians, but there are many Christian groups of which this is true. Kabbalah, Theosophy, Yoga, Muslim Islamic cults, feminism, girl worship, woman worship, inclusivity and diversity, Zionism, materialism, government, scientism, Satanism. Are they going to turn around and say, yeah, you know what? We did screw your life up and we're really sorry. Here you are, here's a load of compensation and we're going to make it all better. No, of course not. They're going to walk away from you. They're going to basically deny any sort of responsibility. I'll give you another example. This is somebody who I knew when I was a much younger man and lost contact with. And this poor woman spent 20 years in a religious cult, and she got in contact with me a few years ago, and I spent about 300 to 350, maybe even 400 hours on Skype trying to help her. And she gave her life, providing free childcare. She gave her youth, her beauty, and she was a beautiful woman. She's not now. She's been used up, skeletal. By the time she left these people, she looked like she got out of a concentration camp. They spat her out the other side. And, incidentally, she'd been raped by one of the leaders for Jesus, because Jesus loved her so much. Now, does that group take responsibility? No, of course not. Did anybody from that group say, you know what? We're wondering how you are. You've given us your life, and now you've left. We've come to see how you are. No. As I say, I spent 300, probably 400 hours just listening and helping to debrief her, because she was suicidal. They would have been quite happy for her. You know what? I know how that group, and because they're all the same. Once you've studied one in any depth, they're all the same, how they operate. They would have said, oh, well, God allowed it. If she'd been, a true believer or something, she wouldn't have done this. And they don't take any responsibility. They don't care. And I'm not just talking about that particular cult. I'm talking about all cults. They're all the same. They all do it. I'll give you another example. Government. So let's say your son has gone off to fight yet another war for whatever it is, the criminal state of Israel or an oil cartel, or to further some other unspoken agenda decided by men not only do you not vote for, you've never even heard of them. And when your son comes back in a body bag or just with his legs blown off, is there a responsibility for that? I mean, real compensation, if that were possible, assistance even? No, there isn't. And that's true for all cults. Now, what's as interesting for me is when I began to give this some thought, is that modern cults work in vicious pairs. I'll give you an example. Feminism, which is a means of essentially weaponizing women against their natures and interests, and it's a must-be from the ruling elite. And another must-be, which is the sexualization, or the over-sexualization of women. So you've got these two conflicting energies. It's a bit like car advertising. When you sit down and think about it, you've got the car advertising, which sells you this idea, the wind in your hair and complete freedom, driving around fast everywhere, compared to the reality of speed bumps, speed traps, automated fines and traffic wardens. Another example is the worship of solipsism, which is, it's all about me, how wonderful I am, etc., etc., and the promotion of mediocrity. You've got these two things working in tandem. So now everybody's opinion is a fact of some kind, no matter how irrelevant or ill-conceived. And believe me, I'm on the receiving end of a lot of this, so I do know. At the same time, being a useless underachiever is now a form of greatness in the West. In particular, everyone's a winner just for turning up. You get participation awards. So if it was solipsism alone, if it was just people thinking that the universe revolved around them, but they still, had some objective understanding, we could bear that. Or if they were mediocre, but understood that fact and still recognized that there are people who are objectively superior, and we could just about handle that. But it's the combination of the worship of solipsism and the promotion of mediocrity which is simply unsustainable. Now, whether you like it or not, whether I like it or not, Western civilization, the Western civilization, the civilization everyone else wants to join but then attacks when they arrive, was built by European men who took responsibility. Now, amongst European men now, responsibility way down. That's all going. These are habits. These are cultural habits. And unless you have a stock of people who are prepared to stand up and take responsibility, you just end up with, well, you end up actually with a tyrant's wet dream, which is what we've got and what's happening now. My argument is that this is a tyranny. It's a takedown, but it's not like the old tyrannies, the old top-down tyrannies of old. This is a peer-to-peer tyranny. It's a democratized and atomized tyranny. It's a tyranny built on and in the social blockchain. And it's quite difficult for us to get. Why? Because we were educated under the Prussian school. We were educated. Look up Prussian school, how Prussian school operated. The Prussian system of education was designed to force young boys to be so pliable and obedient and compliant that when ordered to go to do a completely unnatural thing, climb over a trench into oncoming machine gun fire on command, that they would do it. That's why all of us had the system of education that we had. They used that system. There are other systems of education. They chose the one which maximized unthinking obedience for everyone. Now that should tell you something. So to go back to these kinds of cults, they use two key characteristics: deception and the abdication of responsibility. Now, you may not know my work with the Qur'an, you may care even less. If that's the case, bear with me. What I'm going to do is give you, just for your interest, a verse from the Qur'an which will shed some light on what I've just been talking about. Now, this comes from the 4th chapter or surah of the Qur'an, and it's verses 120 through 122. And the subject here is the shaitan or Satan. He, the shaitan, promises them and arouses desires in them. And the shaitan promises them only deception. These, those who follow him, these, their habitation is hell, and they will find no refuge therefrom. But those who heed warning and do deeds of righteousness, we will make them enter gardens beneath which rivers flow, they abiding eternally therein forever. The promise of God is true, and who is more truthful than God in speech? Now that's 4:120 through 122. Notice here there's no mention of a religion. I think we all know what doing deeds of righteousness means. So we'll move on to the next one, which is found at verse 7, 21 through 20, chapter 7, 21 through 22. Again, the subject is the shaitan, and he swore to them, this is to our first parents in the garden, he swore to them, I am to you a sincere counselor, and he led them by deception. Now we're going to get into the abdicating into responsibility, and this is at 8:48. And when the shaitan makes their deeds fair to them and says, none among men can defeat you this day when I am at your side. So this is what he'll claim, you see, in all of these cults. None among men can defeat you this day when I am at your side. The government will protect you. Feminism will protect you. Zionism will protect you. Whatever it is, whatever ism it is, will protect you. Christianity will protect you. Islamism will protect you. Then when the companies come within sight of one another, he turns on his heels and says, I am innocent of you. I see what you see not. I fear God, and God is severe in retribution. The Qur'an gives us archetypes. These are archetypes. We have another example at 59, 16 through 17. Like the example of the shaitan when he says to man that he should deny, i.e. deny God. Then when he denies, he says, I am innocent of thee. I fear God, the Lord of all mankind. So the final outcome for them is that they are in the fire, they abiding eternally therein. Now the Qur'an is clear, absolutely, that there is full responsibility, full accountability. Our deeds have weight. There will be no shifting of responsibility onto others on that day, no matter what people do here. This is the whole of Surah 99, which is a very short one. It consists of 8 verses. When the earth is in complete convulsion, and the earth brings forth its burdens, i.e. all those people who are buried in the earth in whatever form, and man says, what ails it? That day will it recount its tales, i.e. it's going to tell everything that it knows, because thy Lord will instruct it. That day will men come out separated to be shown their deeds, and whoso does the weight of an atom of good will see it, and whoso does the weight of an atom of evil will see it. So that's Surah 99. It's the complete accountability, no matter what you or I may think. Now the other side of this is that this is a huge opportunity. And this is something known and experienced by libertarians, people who are not in a cult, people who do take personal responsibility. And it is that when you stop whining and stop looking to the group to validate you, stop abdicating moral responsibility, you gain strength. There is no escape from the consequences of your choices. And the really smart thing is to wise up to that reality and to do it now. When you do, and I've done both, you see, it's not like I always lived like I am now. I have made that decision and paid the price, but I've also gained the benefit. So I can compare. When you make that switch, when you go, as it were, spiritually MGTOW, men going their own way from any kind of cult, including not just the woman cult, but all of it, life becomes like a video game in which you get to pick up all the free points. And believe me, there are loads lying around because most people don't want them. Most people ignore them because they're too busy claiming special cultic privileges or looking to the group to save them or validate them. But we all die alone. It says at 43:67, friends that day will be enemies to one another, save those of prudent fear. Your only true friends are those who fear God, those who actually call you to good works, those who call you away from the fire. They're your only friends. All those other friends you think you have, they're not your friends. I repeat, friends that day will be enemies to one another, save those of prudent fear. And the last verse I'm going to read, or section, is from 167 to 169. The previous verse was 43:67, if I forgot to mention it. I'll add these to the drop down below. So 167 through 169 reads, when those who were followed will disown those who followed, and they will see the punishment, and the connections will be cut off, and those who followed will say, were we to return, we would disown them just as they have disowned us. Thus will God show them their deeds as regrets for them, and they will not come out of the fire. So those who are followed, those people that, that people abdicate their own abilities in favor of, they'll disown their own followers on that day when they see the punishment. And those who followed will say, were we to return, if only we could go back to that life, to the first life, we would disown them just as they have disowned us. That's how good a friend all your cults are to you. The feminists, the Gloria Steinems, the governments, the whole lot. They're going to disown you, they're going to disregard you, they're going to say they want nothing to do with you, and you're going to say you want nothing to do with them. Thus will God show them their deeds as regrets for them, and they will not come out of the fire. And then it continues, O mankind, eat of what is in the earth lawful and good, and follow not the footsteps of the shaitan. He is an open enemy to you, He but enjoins upon you evil and sexual immorality, and that you ascribe to God what you know not. That's 167 through 169. So again, in case you haven't noticed, the Qur'an does not contain Brand Islam's cult. It contains simple guidance on how to navigate the deceptions of this world successfully, because we're not born with an antivirus pre-installed. We don't have it. But God provides us that guidance in order that we might reach the next life in the best possible condition. That's all for now. If you're listening on YouTube, you can download my full translation of the Qur'an free using the button in the top right-hand corner, or buy the hard copy there at 10% less than on Amazon. I also encourage you to sign up for the Qur'anite Plus newsletter on the site to get occasional micro updates. You can download the audio from my YouTube videos to your mobile device using the links in the drop down below. I recommend meetquranites.com to connect with other Qur'an alone believers. Like if you like, comment if you have something constructive to say, and subscribe to get more each week. And use the link in the drop down below to donate if you would like to help me keep doing this. And remember, this life is short, eternity is long. If you want good trees, plant good seeds.